My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. The Journal of the Two Sisters. Dear Diary, my name is Celestia. Today my sister Luna and I are to be crowned princesses of Equestria. I'm starting this journal so we can both write about our amazing adventures as princesses. Well, I hope they are amazing. I don't actually know if they will be amazing. I'm assuming they will be amazing. But I guess I shouldn't assume they will be amazing because I've never been the princess of Pegasi, unicorns and earth ponies. Maybe they won't be amazing. Maybe I won't be amazing. Maybe I'll be really rotten. What if I'm known as Celestia, the really rotten princess of Equestria? Okay, calm down Celestia. You're freaking yourself out again. Take a breath. You're going to work hard like you always do. And as long as you work hard, you're going to be just fine. Okay, that's better. First of all, I just want to say that I can't even believe that Luna and I are going to be princesses. It all happened so suddenly and unexpectedly. A very unusual unicorn sorcerer who called himself Starswell the Bearded approached us. And when I say unusual, I'm not meaning to be rude, just accurate. First of all, he came by the Bearded, quite honestly because he has the longest brown beard I've ever seen. Second of all, he wore a large wizard hat and cloak with a stars and moons pattern on the fabric. And all over the edging were bells that jingled and jangled when he walked. Let's just say I could easily find him in a crowd. Starswell and his representatives, Smart Cookie of the Earth Ponies, Private Pansy of the Pegasi, and Starswell's apprentice, Clover the Clever of the Unicorns, told us all about the previous struggles between the Pegasi, unicorns and Earth Ponies. Since the tribes came to a peaceful understanding and established Equestria, they wanted rulers to help uphold that peace, which was why they came to us. They knew that Alicon stood for everything Equestria was founded upon: love, harmony, and friendship. And because Alicons are a combination of Pegasi, unicorns and earth ponies, they believed that we could represent the citizens of Equestria in an unbiased manner, all ponies being equal in our eyes. So they asked us to be their princesses. And it was really nice, but still a whole lot of pressure. I mean, Luna and I are very honored. How could we not be? It's not every day that you're asked to rule over an entire land. Actually, Luna and I clarified that our role in Equestria wouldn't be as rulers, and we will not think of the ponies of Equestria as our subjects. That would be very awkward. We will be Equestria's guardians. That sounds much friendlier. We will serve and protect, watching over Equestria's lands and skies, keeping them peaceful and safe. I just hope I end up doing a really good job, and I actually have amazing adventures to write about in this journal. Celestia.
Diary. We are Luna, and we are to be crowned Princess of Equestria. Thou art our royal diary, in which we shall write our most profound thoughts of being said princess and... Oh, forget it. I was going to try to write in the royal Canterlot voice, which Celestia and I learned when we were fillies. The Alicons thought it was an important part of our education, but we both thought speaking like that every day sounded silly. The only time we really used it was when we were playing. See, we ran and flew in the hills of Canterlot. We'd pretend we were princesses and talk in the royal we. Being all formal and haughty and stuff, but as much as it's fun to speak, writing in the royal Canterlot voice is just too exhausting, so I'm starting over. I'm Luna, this is Celestia's and my journal, where we're going to make note of the interesting stuff that happens while we're princesses, or as it's formally called, the era of the two sisters! Exclamation point! I'm going to write about the good stuff, the bad stuff, and hopefully some really awesome magic stuff, which will probably fall under good, bad, and awesome. Today is our official coronation, and while I was excited when Celestia and I were first approached by Starswell and his band of merry ponies, now that it's actually happening, I'm a little nervous. I just really hope I do a good job for Equestria as their princess. I mean, it's going to be incredible, but it's also a huge responsibility. In the end, I need to remember to be myself, and part of that is getting to know every pony and having fun. I'm excited to fly with the Pegasi, get down to earth with some earth ponies, and whip up some spells with the unicorns. And I'm especially excited to talk to that Starswell the Bearded guy again. I bet he's a great sorcerer and we could really learn a lot from each other. Plus, he has the best name ever. Luna.
Dear Diary, today's coronation was so lovely. Being crowned Princess of Equestria beside Luna almost felt like something I'd lived before, like déjà vu. When Luna and I were fillies, we'd make tiaras out of gems we found in the hills of Canterlot. Luna was so good at finding the prettiest ones. Then we would pretend we were princesses and fly about our land, getting all of our subjects, which of course were rabbits and squirrels and a turtle named Jim. So today, as Star Swirl, the bearded, placed our crowns upon our heads, it just felt like a dream come true. Afterward, every pony enjoyed this fantastic party. The Earth ponies had grown delicious food, and the Pegasi had arranged the perfect weather. But the most magical moment came when Star Swirl stepped up with 10 other unicorns. Using their unicorn magic, Star Swirl and 5 of the unicorns focused their energies and brought down the sun. Star Swirl then joined the other 5 unicorns, and using all their concentration, he guided them in raising the moon. It was truly amazing, and took a huge amount of powerful magic. Luna and I watched in complete awe. In thanks, Luna and I shot colorful lights from our horns, decorating the night sky. Every pony cheered in celebration. It was the perfect finale to a most wonderful day. I don't know what I was so worried about. Everything and every pony was perfect. Celestia. Dear Diary, we are now a princess. Luna. Dear Diary, because Alicons age at a different rate than the rest of the pony races, Luna and I don't have our cutie marks yet. Being a blank flank at our age never felt unusual. I've always known that I would get my cutie mark at a proper time. But now that we are surrounded by so many ponies who have their cutie marks and are so much younger than we are, I must admit it feels a bit odd. Hopefully, now that we are princesses, Luna and I will find our true calling and finally get our cutie marks. Celestia. Dear Diary, Sally and I have been touring all of Equestria, getting to know every pony and trying to decide where to build our castle. We've been flying here and there, putting on our royal princess faces. And frankly, I'm exhausted. The question is, where do we build? It's not like every part of Equestria isn't nice. In fact, every pony is making a point of showing us just how perfect their part of Equestria is. But to be perfectly honest, I'd like it to be a place that's kind of away from every pony. A sanctuary. Some place where we can have our private time. Is that a bad thing for a princess to say? Probably. But even a princess wants some downtime, right? Anyhow, as we continued our search, Starswell told us about this place in Equestria called the Everfree Forest. And this place is awesome. It's totally unlike any other part of Equestria. The plants grow on their own, and the animals take care of themselves. No help from the Earth ponies. The river does its own thing. No Pegasus assistance needed. It's just kind of wild. But then at the edge there's this ravine. And deep in the ravine is this really cool tree. And I don't know, there's just something about it. Something magical. I just got this feeling when I saw it. I think this is where we should build our castle. Luna. Dear Diary, Luna and I were talking with Starswell about the tree in the ravine at the edge of the Everfree Forest. And he told us that it's not any ordinary tree. It is the Tree of Harmony. Oh my gosh, I couldn't believe it. I totally flipped. I literally flipped in the air. Luna snorted at me and rolled her eyes because I'm such a dog. But to me it was like meeting the most famous tree in the world. But that's because it actually is the most famous tree in the world. I've read about the Tree of Harmony in books, but I didn't know that it actually existed. According to the legends, the Tree of Harmony is incredibly powerful and is said to hold the elements of all that is good and true. It's such a fascinating tree, and I'm so drawn to it. On it are 3 markings, a sun, a moon, and a star. I've asked Starswell what these stand for, but he seems to have no idea. I don't know why, but I feel like the sun image is calling to me. Is that weird? Luna and I are both so drawn to the tree that we decided to build our castle of the 2 sisters above the ravine. Starswell agreed, saying that having our castle built near the Tree of Harmony will give us strength and help us protect Equestria. Celestia. Dear Diary, Sally and I got to build our own castle from scratch. And as much as I love my sister, all she wants for it to be a traditional old castle with arches and columns and turrets and stuff. You know what I say to that? Boring. Why have a regular hallway when you can have a hallway with trapdoors? Why have walls that just stand there when there can be secret doors? Normal paintings? No. I want a kind with eyes cut out, so I can spy on ponies. Who needs plain torch holders when there can be disembodied hoofs holding the torches? Creepy. And sure we can have a throne room, but I want a trapdoor under my throne. Yeah, secret escape plan. Then I had this amazing idea for an organ that triggers the trapdoors, sending ponies through the tunnels and plopping them outside. Not quite sure how that will work yet. If I can convince Sally, this is going to be the best castle ever. Luna. Dear Diary, my sister is so weird. She wants this castle to have all these odd tricks and traps all over. And what do I really want? I want a huge library where I can finally put all the books I've been collecting all these years. Then Luna suggested that we build a secret room in the library where I could read in private. I totally geeked out at the brilliance of that. In the end, I guess we're both a little weird, huh? Celestia. Dear Diary, for the past couple of weeks the Pegasi, unicorns and earth ponies have been helping Sally and me to build the castle. Things were going great, but then the most horrible thing happened. A team of ponies headed into the Everfree Forest for more supplies and didn't come back. This was the first bad thing that happened since Sally and I became princesses. I immediately wanted to fly into the Everfree Forest to search for the ponies, but Sally stopped me, saying we needed to discuss things first. I guess she was right. I couldn't just go flying off without a plan. I mean, should we both search for the missing ponies? Or should one of us stay with the crew at the castle side to make sure they were safe while the other searched? I love the Everfree Forest and have been spending any free time I have exploring it. So we decided that I should search for the ponies, while Sally stayed at the castle side and kept every pony calm, easing any of their fears. Besides, we both knew she'd be way better at that than I would. So I took off and did a sweep of the forest from above. I knew the path that the ponies have been taking for supplies, and their hoofprints had been well worn to the ground. But then they veered off into a different direction. I landed to follow since the tracks weren't clear from the air. It wasn't obvious why the ponies had gone this way, but all I could figure out was that they needed to get supplies from a new source. Sure enough, I finally arrived where the ponies had come for supplies. But there were no ponies. I hunted around, and when I turned the corner, I saw a cave that was blocked by a gate of brambles. Behind that gate I heard cries for help. It was the ponies. I ran to break them free, but before I was able to reach the cave, a huge horrible manticore flew at me roaring in anger. He lunged at me furiously and I didn't know what to do. I'd never battled any pony, let alone a manticore. I took to the air to dodge his attack, but he just came right after me, since manticores have wings too, of course. The two of us began fighting in the sky, with the manticore trying to strike me with his massive claws, while I tried to kick him with my hoofs. I realized that I also had magic on my side, so I fired at him with my horn, trying to stun him, but the manticore was obviously much more used to fighting than I was. He avoided every one of my shots. I was beginning to tire out, when suddenly Sally came flying in to help me. I had never been so happy to see my sister. She shot a powerful ray at the manticore, that was doubled by another ray from the ground. I heard a jingling of bells, and when I looked down, I saw Starswirl assisting in the manticore's defeat. I added a third ray, and together we held the manticore in place mid-attack, and brought him to the ground. As the manticore tried to break from his magical bonds, I demanded to know why he trapped the ponies. I'm not sure what sort of answer I was expecting from him. It's not like I spoke manticore or anything. But then, as he began to roar his answer, I realized that I actually could understand him. Amazing! The manticore roared that the ponies had smashed and destroyed his home. They clearly had no respect for him, so he was going to make them pay. I suddenly realized that the ponies' new supply site must have been the manticore's home. No wonder he was so upset. Then all of a sudden the manticore burst into tears. It was so sad. I looked at Sally and Starswirl, figuring that they'd heard what I had, and would feel bad for the manticore. But they were still looking furiously at the manticore, and clearly had not understood his language like I had. I quickly relayed to them what the manticore told me. I explained to Sally and Starswirl that the manticore must have seen the ponies dismantling his home and thought they were just tearing it apart. So he attacked and imprisoned them. The three of us released the manticore, and he simply crumbled into a heap of sadness. He may have been playing tough on the outside, but he was a big softy on the inside. After freeing the ponies from their prison, every pony apologized for this terrible misunderstanding, and Celestia and I promised that it could be remedied. Using our Alicon magic, we quickly reassembled the manticore's home, and he admitted that it looked even better than before. Then the most amazing thing happened. That Manticore helped us find the supplies we needed, came back with us to the castle site, and actually helped us build. When Starswell had arrived at the castle site and heard about the missing ponies, he had feared that I would need help. I'm so glad he did. But Sally was really impressed that I discovered the truth behind the Manticore's anger. Being sensitive to every pony's problems will make us even better princesses. Luna. Dear Diary, the castle is almost done. It's amazing what happens when you make friends with a Manticore. He is strong, he can fly, and he knows every inch of that forest. Melvin, Luna said that's the Manticore's name, told her all about the hidden nooks in the forest, where we could get even more supplies. Plus, Luna has now befriended many creatures in the Everfree Forest, who have also volunteered to help. Between the ponies working in the day, and the crocodiles, the bats and the owls working at night, we've had construction crews going around the clock. And I have to admit, Luna was right. While the columns and arches of the castle are lovely, her added design elements are so much fun. Though some ponies did give us weird looks when we were putting up the unusual decorations, like the paintings, with no eyes, and the hoof wall scones. I don't blame them, those things are creepy. Today Luna and I played hide and seek in the Grand Foyer. I love to duck behind the paintings, and though the Hall of Hoofs still gives her a bit of a fright, the trapdoor slide is Luna's favorite. Soon the organ to the outside will be finished. I can hardly wait. Celestia. My sister and I were meant to rule together. Celestia. Dear Diary, you know what is the best part of building a super weird castle with trapdoors and moving walls and a creepy organ with tunnels? I get to test it all out to make sure it works. And once I know it does, I get to mess with every pony. This is going to be so awesome. Luna. Dear Diary, the castle is finally finished. And today Starswell debated arranged a royal introduction between Luna and me and King Bullion of the Unicorns. I must say that King Bullion was very gracious to come to our castle, considering my sister and I are now taking over, so to speak. There are various kingdoms and empires that were established long before Equestria was founded. During our initial tour, we made it clear to all of them that we were not trying to step on any pony's hooves. King Bullion is still the unicorn king of his region. As the Alicorn princesses, we are simply there to provide protection for Equestria as a whole. While King Bullion seemed fine and quite secure in the situation, his daughter, Princess Platinum, appeared to have her tail in a twist about the whole thing. In fact, she behaved really rudely. Princess Platinum said that we had no right to be in charge of any pony if we didn't even have our cutie marks yet. She continued on saying how dare we think we can rule over others if we don't even know what our true calling is. And while it's true that we still don't have our cutie marks, we have lived far longer than this arrogant princess and have been doing a fine job overseeing Equestria. I was about to speak very rationally to the princess on the matter, but Luna's standard was up. She really does not well with snooty behavior, especially from some pony like Princess Platinum, who is not only far younger than her, but clearly just a pain in the hindquarters. While I can't necessarily condone what Luna did, it was absolutely hilarious and practically knocked prissy Princess Platinum right out of her fancy frock. Celestia. Dear Diary, cutting that snotty little unicorn Princess Platinum in her place was not only deeply satisfying, but it was also incredibly fun. Sally and I were very respectful when Starswell introduced King Bullion and Princess Platinum. But when our introductions were made as the princesses of Equestria, that little upstart turned up her muzzle, rolled her eyes, and claimed she didn't understand why Celestia and I were even needed. After all, she could have been the princess of Equestria herself. Why didn't any pony ask her? I couldn't believe it. If some pony like Princess Platinum thinks she can behave that way with any pony, let alone me, she is sorely mistaken. So I busted out my loudest and most terrifying wild Canterlot voice. Princess Platinum, darest thou treat the princesses of Equestria in such a manner? We are not amused. Thy behavior is disrespectful, ill-befitting of one in thy position, and reflects poorly upon unicorns thou art representing. Perhaps thou shalt be stripped of thy crown and thy title. I expected that pretty princess to run and hide, but much to my surprise, she haughtily flipped her hair and stood her ground. Next she started calling us blank flanks because we don't have our cutie marks yet. Hello, we are alicorns. There's no shame in being a blank flank at our age. But if she wants to get up in my business, she'd better be ready to take what she dishes out.
Clearly thou does not realize we Alicons age at a different rate than other pony races. Our lack of cutie marks does not indicate a lack of maturity, any more than thy brandishing one means thou art actually mature. I looked at my friend Melvin the Manticore. He was up in the balcony watching this rather heated introduction. I gave him a wink. With thy cutie mark dost thou think thou could have tamed the ferocious Manticore? And right on cue, Melvin came swooping down, letting out his most ferocious roar. In truth, Melvin is as gentle as a kitten, but Princess Persnickety didn't know that. She shrieked in horror. We canst not shriek in fear when our subjects are in danger. Thy cowardice wouldst have cost the lives of all the ponies in peril. The princess composed herself and claimed that she would have gotten her wits about her, and found a way to defeat the Manticore. I had to give it to her. This Princess Platinum was not willing to go down without a fight. But then, neither was I. We see that thou art determined to sit upon our throne. I began to back the princess up toward my throne. As I did, I looked over at Melvin and gave him another wink. He smiled and exited, knowing just where to go. Fine, princess. Let us see how thou likest the view. She sat down with a beaming smile, but just as she did, Melvin hit a chord on the organ to the outside. The seat to the throne whipped the princess around and sent her plummeting down through a tunnel, and to the courtyard of the castle. We all heard Princess Platinum shrieking. Suddenly, I began to feel really bad. Maybe this wasn't how one princess should treat another princess, even if the other princess was behaving terribly. I ran outside, and the princess was simply a mess. I felt even more horrible, and was in the middle of apologizing for sending her spinning through the tunnels, when she stopped me, and then Princess Platinum actually started apologizing to me. She was terribly sorry for how she had spoken. It was not an appropriate way for a princess, or any pony, to behave. She said if I were willing, she'd like to start all over again. Relieved, I reached out my hoof to help her up, saying that would be really nice, as I cleaned the muck of her mane. The princess then asked me if, as her new best friend, I could give her lessons in how to speak in the wild Canterlot voice. She thought it was simply fabulous. I couldn't help but smile. We have a feeling this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Luna. Dear Diary, no pony can deny that things with Princess Platinum started out rough. Funny, but rough. But now they're going on much more smoothly. When she saw how plainly the castle was decorated, she offered to have the unicorns with tapestries. Suddenly all these skilled unicorn seamstresses showed up at the castle and started weaving Princess Platinum's gorgeous designs. She created the most beautifully elegant images of Luna and me, and as the unicorns hung them upon the walls, the tapestries provided the last bit of regal elegance that castle needed. Princess Platinum even designed our official seal for the equestrian flag, to fly on the top turret outside our castle. She said she was having more flags made for all of Equestria. I'm so glad that Princess Platinum has realized that Luna and I are here for all of Equestria, including the Unicorn Kingdom, and has come around to being our friend. Celestia. Dear Diary, today Celestia scheduled a tour of the castle and a meeting with Private Pansy, Clover the Clever, and Smart Cookie. But I was just not in the mood to hang out with the four of them and talk about Equestria stuff, so I pretended I was sick. Then when Celestia was giving them a tour of the castle, I went through one of the secret passageways and made that tour one they will never forget. Scaring Private Pansy was too easy. Just walking through the Hall of Hoofs almost made her pass out. But then when I reached my hoof through that secret hole and brushed her on the side, she nearly hit the ceiling. She jumped so high, and the ceilings are really tall. Smart Cookie was a little harder to scare. That girl is a tough nut to crack. I was watching her through a painting, trying to figure out how to fluster her. But then she stood right by a fake wall. I spun around, sending her into a totally different part of the castle. When I spun her around again, I could tell that she was shaken up. Finally, I had to get Clover the Clever. And just like her name implies, this pony has her wits about her, being a unicorn trained by Star Swirl. She has magic on her side. Every time I tried to trap or trick her, she countered it with a spell. She was clearly aware that something was a hoof, but just like Princess Platinum, what she didn't figure on was the organ to the outside. Celestia had them all seated for their big meeting, and whammo, I had the cords on the organ. Clover spun around in her seat and then went plummeting through a tunnel to the outside. I quickly raced back to my room and got back in bed. Sure enough, Celestia came in moments later to see if I was there. She lettered an annoyed and left the room. Success! Luna. Dear Diary,
I had a great meeting with Private Pansy, Clover the Clever, and Smart Cookie, the 3 representatives from the Pegasi, Unicorns, and Earth Ponies, who originally came up to Canterlot. Let me amend that. After Luna's hijinks, and yes, Luna, I know it was you, I had a great meeting with Private Pansy, Clover the Clever, and Smart Cookie. They really represent these 3 races of ponies incredibly well. Smart Cookie noted that Chancellor Puddinghead was making better decisions than usual, and because of this, the Earth Ponies were working harder than ever to produce the best crops in Equestria's history. Private Pansy said that Commander Hurricane was calmer and leading the Pegasus Weather Brigade into action, and weather predictions were terrific. And with her mentor Starswirl, Clover the Clever, and the Unicorns were working on fantastic new spells to more effectively raise and lower the sun and moon and bring beauty to Equestria. Overall, all 3 of them said that since Luna and my coronation, the sense of peace and harmony around Equestria was visible among all the ponies. Celestia. Dear Diary, Chancellor Puddinghead has to be the funniest pony I've ever met in my life. And while she has Smart Cookie to help her get things done, I think Chancellor Puddinghead knows a lot more than she lets on. Today, she and I decided to play hide and seek in the castle, and you'd think that since I designed the castle, I'd have an advantage. Sadly, this was so untrue. When I was hiding, the organ to the outside started playing. As soon as I heard that, I knew I was in for trouble. Suddenly a trapdoor opened and I went whizzing through a tunnel. I landed on my hindquarters in the courtyard, where Chancellor Puddinghead was waiting. Found you! I don't know how she did that, but I'm just saying that the Chancellor might just be less of a Puddinghead and more of a Smart Cookie than ponies realize. Luna. Dear Diary, when Starswirl first invited us to his library, I knew it was going to be fantastic. But when I saw it, my eyes couldn't fully take it all in. The shelves were filled with ancient books and scrolls, covering the history of Pegasi, Unicorns, and Earth Ponies. Starswirl also had books upon books on magic, things I had never read before. How is that even possible? Starswirl noted that he had scrolls on everything from the Eloquent Amulet to the Tree of Harmony. Just scanning the shelves, I saw information that I hadn't even touched upon in all my years of study. Just as an example, while I've read plenty on Eloquent magic, the Unicorns have their own theories and practices that differ from our ways. Amazing, right? Starswirl said that we are always welcome in the library to read, research, and practice spells. I'm not sure if Luna will take him up on that, but I'm absolutely going to. Celestia. Dear Diary, leave it to Celestia to geek out over Starswirl's library. I mean, I want to work on spells with Starswirl, but I don't want to sit in a big old dusty library and read through a million tomes. The 2 book nerds were totally bonding over scrolls and ancient manuscripts, and all sorts of boring stuff. I felt like they'd given me a sleeping spell. Oh well, Starswirl says he has an awesome spell he wants to work on with me. As long as it doesn't involve researching the library, I'm in. Luna. Dear Diary, Starswirl's peculiarity has made him a fantastic sorcerer. He tries things that no pony else would even dream of. He's created and mastered hundreds of spells and has so many more in the works. There's one he's developing now, involving cutie marks that sounds very complex. As some pony who hasn't even gotten a cutie mark, I'm not quite sure where he's going with the spell, and honestly, it's so complicated. I don't know if he'll ever finish it, but his most exciting spells involve time travel, which of course is very challenging, and the spells are causing him a bit of trouble. He has one time travel spell that can only be used once for a brief period of time, and while that's amusing, it's not really practical, and certainly not what Starswirl wants. He desperately wants to be able to travel through space and time with no limitations. I'm trying to help him with the calculations, but it's proving to be far more problematic than either of us expected. Still, we're having a great time trying. Celestia. Dear Diary, there's one area of the Everfree Forest that Melvin won't go beyond. He says it's forbidden. Well, I say that as a princess of Equestria, I need to check these things out. So I went further into the forest, and the trees got thicker and thicker. I could barely see where I was going. The branches were scratching me. Even using my horn to light my way wasn't helping. But finally, the leaves and branches began to loosen up, and I could see again. I looked out and saw a place I'd never seen in all of Equestria. Tall grass was now under my hoofs, and covered the land in front of me. Terribly exhausted from walking and not seeing any pony in sight, I took to the air to find out where I was. Suddenly I saw a village of huts and a group of ponies down on the ground and went down to greet them. But as I got closer, I saw that while they had cutie marks, they weren't exactly ponies. They were unusually covered with stripes, and when they saw me they looked terribly frightened. Suddenly they started speaking, but their language was just as different as the stripes on their coats. Another scum with wretched wings, what kind of evil will it bring? When last one came to haunt our land, we thought we made it understand. Just leave us now, desist and cease, we zebras wish to live in peace. Go now, leave now, forevermore, we banish you, O Manticore. Oh, maybe this was why Melvin said this land was forbidden. As I hovered in the air, I explained that I wasn't a Manticore at all. I was Princess Luna of Equestria, and I was part of an equestrian pony race called Retconned. Most importantly, I did not mean them any harm. Hearing my words, the zebras calmed down, but they were still acting very wary. You say you fall under the equestrian race, and clearly we have similar bodies and face. What baffles us are your wings and horn. Do all in your ways get those when born? Understanding that if you've never seen any pony like me, it might be kind of scary. I explained about all the pony races of Equestria, from Earth to Pegasus to Unicorn, and how Alicorn was an amalgamation of all three of these. The zebras listened very intently, clearly very wise and patient ponyfolk. I then asked what happened with the Manticores, since they appeared to be afraid of them. A zebra elder stepped up and told their tale. Long ago, from whence you came, were horrid beasts that bore that name. With bodies of lions these creatures flew, they came to hunt, their numbers grew. Under attacks we were resigned. This was the end of zebra kind. But then with potions and with spells, the zebras formed protective shells. The manticores could not break through, they soon grew weak and then withdrew. From that day forward they have hidden, knowing zebra lands forbidden. I was amazed by the zebra's tale. When the manticores grew weak, the zebras didn't attack them in return. All they wanted was for the manticores to leave, so they could live in peace. I told them that I only knew of one manticore in Equestria now, and he was actually my friend. They were stunned at this. I couldn't blame them. The way things started with Melvin, I hardly thought we were going to end up as friends. Then again, if I hadn't ventured through the everfree forest, I would have never become friends with zebras. Luna.
Dear Diary, I was so furious at Luna today. Well, first I was annoyed because I couldn't find her anywhere, and we had a meeting with Star Swirl. I figured she was with Melvin, but when I asked him where Luna was, his eyes filled with concern. I don't understand Manticore as well as Luna, but I'm pretty sure he said their last conversation was about the forbidden area past the end of the everfree forest. Melvin clearly doesn't know Luna well enough to know that if you tell her about something forbidden, she is going to want to check it out. He took me to the last place he'd seen her, at the edge of the everfree forest. I asked if he would help me search for my sister, but Melvin refused to go beyond this point. Clearly this area was dangerous, so that's when I got scared for her. I told Starswell where I was going, and that if I didn't return by nightfall with Luna, he should come searching for us. As I pushed farther and farther into the everfree forest, barely able to see beyond the light of my horn, I grew more annoyed, more scared, but then finally furious at Luna. What was she thinking? At last I came upon a strange landscape, but I didn't even have time to take in all its beauty, because all I knew was that Luna was nowhere to be seen. I started flying, scanning the ground for her. Suddenly, standing in the middle of these grasslands, I saw Luna. And she looked fine. She looked safe. I flew down, very relieved, but still so angry. I immediately launched into Luna, telling her that she'd frightened me to pieces. And how dare she take off without telling me? And didn't she realize that I would worry about her? After all, she was my sister, and the most important pony ever to me. But if I couldn't protect her, who could I protect? Finally, I stopped and realized that I was crying, and that all these eyes were looking at me, and that those eyes belonged to zebras? I couldn't believe it. I'd only read about them in books, and Luna was just standing there, in the middle of them. Seeing how distraught I was, Luna went up and hugged me tightly. Hearing about the forbidden land, she just had to go there. And then she met the zebras and got swept up by their story. But she should have told me where she was going. Before she left, She was so very sorry. Relieved that my sister was okay, I calmed down and introduced myself to the zebras, who must have thought I was a little strange, flying up and yelling at my sister like that. But as we spoke, they clearly understood, wanting to protect those who are close to you. I just can't believe that Luna's adventurous spirit led us to zebras. Celestia.
Dear Diary, I've never really given my cutie mark much thought. As Adelcons, we were always told that when it was time for it to appear, it just would. Nothing to really concern myself about, right? But then I was hanging out with Starswirl this evening under the stars, and he said he wanted to teach me a spell that was too powerful for him. But he was confident that with practice, I could perform it with my Adelcon magic. Eager to perform any of Starswirl's spells, I asked what it was. Moving the stars, he replied with a wild gleam in his eyes. But as hard as I tried, it turns out that moving the stars takes quite a bit of concentration. As I was trying to focus on the stars, I became mesmerized by the moon. Starswirl is one of the unicorns who raises and lowers the sun and moon every day, so I asked him about moving the moon. He said he'd be happy to teach me. I thought maybe once I figured out how to raise and lower the moon, I could graduate to moving the stars. Starswirl was sure I'd be able to someday. He's such a great friend, and I'm glad he has so much confidence in me. Luna.
Dear Diary, Starswirl invited Luna and me over to his library today, obviously very excited to share something with us. The two of us were waiting for him for a while, when suddenly he appeared out of nowhere. Luna and I were very startled, and then Starswirl announced with great excitement that he had finally mastered the time travel spell. In fact, Luna and I had just witnessed his returning from his first trip. Luna gave me a look and nudged me to say something to Starswirl. I delicately said that we were very excited for him, but I was a bit surprised that he'd moved forward with the spell, because he and I had been trying to figure out the math for quite some time. Starswirl said that he had gone through our last equation over and over and over again. He couldn't see any errors in it. Yes, I said, but thinking you've mastered a time travel spell and actually mastering a time travel spell are two very different things. Luna gave me another look, urging me to say more. This time Starswirl noticed and asked what was wrong. That's when I broke the news to Starswirl, that while he traveled perfectly well through time, the equation still wasn't quite correct. It wasn't just a time travel spell, it was also an age travel spell. Luna levitated a mirror up to Starswirl, showing him that he was now significantly younger and only had a short brown beard upon his chin. Celestia.
Dear Diary, Sally loves to fly really fast. Always has since we were fillies. And since Commander Hurricane is the fastest flyer in all of Equestria, she thinks racing with him is the best. The three of us were out today, zipping through the clouds, when suddenly something with the head and wings of an eagle, but the body of a lion came flying right toward us. Sally's eyes grew wide. "Griffin!" she yelled. But before any of us could react, the griffin slammed right into Sally, causing her to plummet down from the sky. Commander Hurricane and I went after Sally, flying as fast as we could to try to catch up with her before she hit the ground. The commander caught up with her and flew her down safely. Even though the griffin had hit her really hard, Sally was just fine. But why had he attacked her? Commander Hurricane explained that before Equestria was founded, the Pegasi and the Griffins had many skirmishes over airspace. They'd finally agreed on borders, but maybe since Celestia and I had taken over as princesses of all Equestria, the Griffins wanted to challenge this again. Sally and I asked the commander to take us to Griffin territory, to see if we could clear this up. The commander seemed very hesitant about this, but if we were to protect Equestria, we needed to keep it safe, in the sky as well as on the land. Hopefully, negotiations will go smoothly, and we can all fly safely again. Luna.
Dear Diary, when Commander Hurricane, Luna and I arrived in Griffin territory, we met with Gregor, the leader of the Griffins. I did my very best to kindly negotiate with Gregor the Griffin, asking him to please move the Griffins out of equestrian airspace. But Gregor was grumbly, gruff, and generally a grouch. He said that the previous treaty stated that it was Pegasus airspace, and that the founding of Equestria made it null and void. I stated that he was being unreasonable, and that this was a technicality. However, if he insisted, all we needed to do was draft a new treaty, simply replacing the word Pegasus with Equestrian, and all would be well.
the citizens of Equestria would stay out of Griffin airspace if they would do the same with ours. But Gregor had absolutely no interest in listening to some polite Alicon princess. He kicked us out of Griffin territory and said that if we wanted our airspace, we needed to fight for it. Commander Hurricane had dealt with Gregor before, and knew he wasn't bluffing. The Griffins would not budge an inch, but the last thing Equestria needs is an air battle. There has to be another way. But what? Celestia.
Dear Diary, the Griffins are getting really bold flying into our airspace. It's actually getting quite dangerous for the Pegasi to fly. Even though he's merely been in charge of the Weather Brigade, prior to this, Commander Hurricane is starting to get a defense force ready to battle them. But Sally and I really don't want a battle on our hoofs. When I was speaking to Melvin, he told me that Griffins and Manticores are kind of similar, and not just because they both have bodies of lions. They both also have a very short temper. I noted to Melvin that I witnessed this with him and Gregor. But then Melvin let me in on a big Griffin secret. They are known for having a sweet tooth, and if they don't get what they want, they can get really grumpy. This was totally what I saw with Gregor. But the question was, what was Gregor's tweet of preference? Thanks to Melvin, I found out. As Griffins flew through our airspace, Melvin joined them and found out that Gregor had a preference for pastries, specifically eclairs. Well, among his many skills, Star Swirl can whip up a batch of eclairs that will make your mouth water. Sally and I prepared to fly back into Griffin territory. But before we did, Melvin gave me one last piece of information. Back when the Manticores went into zebra country, one of the things that really freaked him out was when the zebra spoke in rhyme. Now, he didn't know if Griffins would be as weirded out by this as Manticores, but it was worth a try. With the eclairs in our saddlebags, we flew in to propose a Griffin-Pegasus peace treaty, and while I had prepared the rhyme, I thought I needed a little something special to give that royal touch. Gregor flew up, and I began to speak. We princesses greet thee with a singular mission, to deal with the gruffiness of Gregor the Griffin. Through equestrian skies the Griffins did choose to fly, with abandon. We were not amused. Then Gregor thy rudeness, it did so offend. We could have just fought, but chose to amend. For animals we find do not attack, when their stomachs are rumbling, in need of a snack. So Starswell the Bearded made your favorite eclair. Remove thyself now from equestrian air. Gregor was visibly shaking, as Sally then presented him with his favorite chocolate eclair. I'm not sure if this was because he was hungry, or because he was really happy to see that eclair, or because of my royal canterlot voice in rhyme scared the feathers off him. But upon eating it, Gregor's demeanor suddenly changed. He apologized profusely, thanked us both for being so patient with him, and willingly removed the Griffins from Equestria's airspace, as the new treaty stated. Gregor also admitted that he had been a bit cranky since his last pastry chef left. Gosh, I wonder why he left. Bad working conditions perhaps? He also wondered if he could get Starswell's eclair recipe. Luna.
Dear Diary, whenever Starswell travels in time, he is very careful not to tell us anything about our future, though I can see in his eyes that there may be troubled times ahead for Equestria. I'm just so glad we have the Tree of Harmony to give us strength. More and more those three markings of the sun, the moon, and the star draw me in and make me feel like there's something special about them. When I said this again to Starswell, he got a little sparkle in his eye. For once he couldn't hide it. Those signs are important for Luna's and my future. Celestia.
Dear Diary, I'm really scared. When Sally and I became princesses of Equestria, we made a promise to keep Equestria safe, and so far we've tackled some tough foes. We confronted a Manticore and faced off with Griffins, but I'm afraid we may not be up for what's coming. An urgent message was just delivered by a sentry of the Crystal Empire, saying that Princess Amore and the Crystal Ponies are in terrible danger, because the Crystal Heart has been stolen. Sally and I met the Unicorn Princess during our first tour of Equestria, after we'd been crowned. Unlike Princess Platinum, who acted like a total pain in the hindquarters. When she first met us, Princess Amore was not threatened at all by Celestia and me becoming princesses of Equestria. She totally understood that the Crystal Empire was still her domain, but she could call on us whenever she and the Crystal Ponies needed help. But no pony thought that would ever happen, because the Crystal Empire had the strongest protection of all, the Crystal Heart. Of all the stories I heard in our travels,
The one about the founding of the Crystal Empire is my favorite. See, the whole reason the Crystal Empire exists is because of the Crystal Heart. When the Crystal Ponies founded Crystal Heart, the young unicorn Amore found her true calling as a pony who was always full of love. She felt an immediate connection to the Crystal Heart. Amore projected the positive energy within her into the Crystal Heart, which then magnified that love, sending it over what would then become the Crystal Empire. Amore immediately got her cutie mark of a crystalline heart and became princess of the Crystal Empire. From that day forward, the Crystal Empire was protected by the love emanating from the Crystal Heart. Now that the Crystal Heart has been stolen, Princess Amore and the Crystal Empire are weak and vulnerable. Sally and I must get it back, and that's what's really scaring me, because it was stolen by a dragon. Luna. Dear Diary, when Luna and I arrived at the Crystal Empire, things were in worse shape than we could have imagined. Without the love emanating from the Crystal Heart, all the Crystal Ponies had completely plummeted into a state of darkness. Princess Amore tried to send a protective aura of love over the Empire by herself, but without the Crystal Heart to magnify it, her unicorn magic simply wasn't strong enough. She'd completely depleted herself of her powers, and it was unclear if they would ever be restored. We had to get that Crystal Heart back. Maybe that could help heal Princess Amore. But to do that, Luna and I would have to face the dragon. Princess Amore told us the dragon lived high up in the Crystalline Mountain, where the Crystal Heart was originally discovered, by the ponies mining for crystals. According to the legends, when the dragon heard of the amazing gems and crystals that lay within the mountain, he took up residence there, claiming the entire Crystalline Mountain as his hoard. But he had been dormant for so long, nobody knew if his existence was just a myth. The Crystal Ponies began mining, and since no dragon disturbed them, they figured all was well. When they found the Crystal Heart and the Crystal Empire was born, all concerns about the dragon completely vanished. But obviously the dragon is very real, and he views the Crystal Heart as his own. The question is, how do Luna and I convince a creature, known for her selfishness, to part with something that can save an important part of Equestria? Celestia. Dear Diary, I don't think I've really ever said this, ever. But my sister is amazing. First of all, we had to come up with a plan to get back the Crystal Heart. Sally thought we should try to negotiate with the dragon, which I totally got. I mean, who knows? Maybe once he knew how important this crystal was to every pony in the Crystal Empire, he'd be willing to give it back. But in case he attacked, Stars prepared a powerful spell, so that Sally and I could hold the dragon back. It was much more powerful than the one we used on Melvin, when he attacked me. Still, dragons are incredibly strong, and I thought it was good to have reinforcements, in case negotiations and magic both failed. I immediately called in Commander Hurricane, who assembled an air squad of Pegasi. I also contacted Melvin and Gregor for help. It wouldn't hurt to have a Manticore and a team of Griffins ready for a full-on attack, in case Sally's one-on-one with the dragon went south. Sally and I flew up to the dragon's lair, with our backup close behind. We expected the dragon to be right there guarding the Crystal Heart really closely, but he was nowhere to be seen. And the Crystal Heart was sitting right there unprotected. He'd obviously stolen it and tossed it aside, because it was sitting right on the edge of the cave, like a bit of garbage. I told Sally we should just grab it and leave, but she wanted to settle things with the dragon and make sure this menace would no longer disturb Princess Amore and the Crystal Empire. Announcing herself as the Princess of Equestria, Sally very politely requested to see the dragon, and with a whoosh, he was suddenly right in her face. He looked like he was about to strike, so Sally and I summoned the spell to hold him in place. It held the dragon for about 10 seconds, and then he ripped through our magical bonds, like they were tissue paper. He seemed mildly impressed that we even tried to subdue him. The dragon demanded to know why we were disturbing him. Remaining calm, Sally said there had obviously been a misunderstanding. He took the Crystal Heart, which was of great importance to the Crystal Empire, so if he could kindly return it, we would be on our way. The dragon picked up the Crystal Heart in his huge claws and held it close to Sally's face, telling her that she had a lot of nerve coming here, asking for it. After all, the Crystal Ponies actually stole it from him when they mined the Crystalline Mountain, which was his hoard. He then looked at the assembly of flying creatures ready to battle him, and merely scoffed. He asked Sally if this pathetic group was actually going to attempt to battle him if he didn't give them the Crystal Heart. When Sally said that was a last resort, the dragon snorted at her and began to toss the heart about mockingly, almost dropping it at points. It looked so tiny as he flung it about. He admitted that he could give it to us. After all, he had more than enough treasures. And really, this crystal heart was just a trifle and so terribly tacky. But all that said, he wouldn't, because he really didn't care what happened to the crystal ponies. What was his, and dragons don't share, even if perfect pony princesses ask politely. And that was the straw that broke that Alicon's back. Sally was willing to put on a brave face and speak with this dragon. She was even willing to battle against him if necessary. But to be spoken to with such disrespect by a creature that was simply doing something to spite others, that was something she was not willing to allow. That was when Sally pulled out the best royal cantaloupe voice I had ever heard. Suddenly, it was like Celestia was on fire. She actually glowed with fury, and her voice echoed through the air. "How dare thee! We are not any mere pony princess. We are Princess Celestia, Alicon Princess of Equestria. We are here to protect the Pegasi, unicorns, and earth ponies of this land. Thou hast threatened our citizen, and we shall not stand for that. Return unto us the crystal heart, or thou shalt pay a mighty price, dragon." We all looked over at the dragon, and he was shaking in absolute fear. He immediately gave me the crystal heart and zipped into the crystalline mountain. From the look of terror in his eyes, I'm sure he'll never be a problem again. Sally shook off her angry glow, becoming herself again. She didn't quite remember everything that had happened, but we all agreed that we should never make her angry. As soon as we returned the crystal heart to its rightful place, Princess Amora's unicorn magic was restored, and she was able to power up the heart once again. That energy spread all over the Crystal Empire, filling the crystal ponies with love, which then fed back into the crystal heart. Every pony celebrated, inviting Sally and me to their very first crystal fair. Without Princess Amora and the crystal heart, the Crystal Empire had been so vulnerable. Fortunately, now that the dragon is no longer a threat, they are safe and no pony else will ever harm this perfectly peaceful community. Luna.
Dear Diary, just when Luna and I thought nothing else bad could possibly happen in Equestria, we woke up this morning to complete darkness. Well, not complete. The moon was still shining brightly in the sky, but the sun was nowhere to be seen. We were wondering who could have done such a thing when we heard the familiar jingling of bells approaching the castle. With our hearts aglow, Luna and I rushed up to meet Star Swirl, but when we saw him, we were shocked. While he physically looked as young as when we'd first met him, his beard was now completely grey. We asked where he travelled that could have done this, but Star Swirl explained that it wasn't time travel that caused his beard to go grey. It happened when he was trying to lower the moon and raise the sun. As Luna and I had seen, 6 unicorns are required for the task of raising and lowering the sun and the moon, every day and night. Star Swirl was always one of the 6, for both the rising and the setting. But it takes a powerful amount of magic, and what no pony told us was that the unicorns who volunteer for the job can only withstand the task for a short period of time, before their magic is completely depleted. Forever. Star Swirl himself had been the only unicorn with strong enough magic to withstand this process day in and day out, night after night. But 10 other unicorns constantly needed to offer up their magic as sacrifice for all of Equestria. This morning, they ran out of full-grown unicorns with magical abilities, and were unable to perform their task. When Star Swirl tried to lower the moon by himself, he was unable to. His magic was depleted, and his beard turned grey. Luna and I looked at each other, mortified. Why didn't Star Swirl come to us sooner? Why didn't he tell us this was happening to the unicorns? And what could we do to help? Star Swirl's eyes brightened. He clearly had an idea. As we knew, Alicons possessed a level of magic far beyond anything a unicorn could ever imagine. Raising and lowering the sun and moon wouldn't cause us any harm. In fact, if the myths he'd read were true, it would actually rejuvenate us, making our magic that much more powerful. Then, as if he even needed to say anything more, Star Swirl asked if as princesses of Equestria, we would be willing to be the new guardians of the sun and the moon. Luna looked nervously at Star Swirl. He'd never taught her how to lower the moon, and now that he had no magic, he couldn't. Again, he smiled. He hadn't taught her because he knew she didn't need any lessons. This was all Luna needed to hear. She and I looked at each other, and without even speaking, we expanded our wings and took to the sky. In perfect unison, I began to raise the sun, just as Luna lowered the moon. It was magical and fulfilled something deep within me. I suddenly
felt a sense of completion, as if I'd always been meant to do this. I looked at Luna as we landed. In the sunlight I saw that she now had a crescent moon cutie mark. I realized that she was grinning oddly at me. When I turned, I saw that I had a sun cutie mark. We'd finally gotten them, but these were more than just cutie marks. Both markings looked incredibly familiar. I ran down to the Tree of Harmony, and our cutie marks were the exact symbols on the tree. Luna and Starswell had followed me. When I asked him if he knew about the pony with the last symbol of the star, he shrugged, clearly knowing something. But I guess I'll have to wait and meet that pony myself someday. Celestia. Dear Diary, I did it. I lowered the moon. Even though Starswell hadn't taught me, I had a feeling that I already knew how, and that it was what I was meant to do. So when Sally and I woke up this morning to darkness, I thought maybe today was the day. Then when Starswell showed up, his words were the final boost of confidence I needed to take to the sky, meet my destiny and get my cutie mark. But raising the sun and lowering the moon weren't the only things Sally and I had to fix today. Bruce Starswell's and the rest of the unicorn's magic needed to be restored. Thankfully, with all the power we'd gotten from the sun and the moon, Sally and I were able to return their magic to them without any problem. Starswell's beard turned brown again. Sally helped Clover the Clever, and once I brought back Princess Platinum's magic, I got to show off my new cutie mark. She loved it. I've always heard that getting my cutie mark would make me feel more complete, but I didn't understand what it really meant until it happened. When I flew into the sky, I knew I was going to lower that moon, to help bring on the day. Now I can't wait until it's time to raise it again, so that I can enjoy the night. And to think that I get to do this every day and night for as long as I'm the Princess of Equestria. Luna. Dear Diary, when Luna and I began this journal, I said that we are going to record our amazing adventures as princesses. And at first I was afraid they wouldn't be amazing. But I have to say, from my end, they have gone beyond anything I could have ever expected. Now that Luna and I have begun raising and lowering the sun and the moon, and finally gotten our cutie marks, I feel that we've entered a new stage. So hopefully, there will be even more exciting adventures to come for the Princesses of Equestria. Celestia. As Princesses of Equestria, we will guide and protect all the ponies in the land. Celestia.